She stated, "My mother is employed by NASA." The entire class chuckled until a badge entered the room and altered the situation. The classroom was slightly scented with pencil residue and hand sanitizer on Tuesday, shortly following recess. Miss Lawson had scarcely completed roll call when she clapped her hands and announced, "All right, it's time for our What My Parent Does presentations." The children rose one by one and recounted their experiences. A father who served as a firefighter, a mother who worked at a nearby bakery, and a sibling who served in the Army, although he did not technically qualify, received a round of applause. Afterward, it was Talia Jefferson's turn. She stood slowly, holding a small index card that bore her name in purple ink. Talia was one of the more reserved students in her class. She was intelligent, but she was not the type to raise her hands solely to hear herself speak. She gazed around the room, establishing eye contact with no one in particular, and articulated, "My mother is employed by NASA." Silence for a moment. Subsequently, the laughter ensued. I then burst into hilarity. This is not the type of explosion that occurs simultaneously, rather, it is the type that propagates in waves, increasing in volume with each perplexed or amused chuckle that is exchanged among the attendees. Someone from the rear abruptly exclaimed, "NASA, wait. You mean, like, the space people?" Another voice whispered, "She is deceiving," but it was not spoken discreetly enough. Even the expression of Miss Lawson was uncharacteristic. She did not chuckle, however, her eyebrows slightly raised, as if she, too, found it difficult to believe. Talia blinking gradually. She refrained from shouting. She refrained from running. The woman maintained a composed demeanor, her hands remaining unwavering. "Yes," she reiterated. "She is a systems engineer at NASA." The words remained suspended in the air, as if they were not meant to be there. One of those tight-lipped smiles, the kind that signifies we are now moving on, was given by Miss Lawson, who was standing near the board. "I appreciate your assistance, Talia," she replied, her eyes already fixed on her clipboard. "Next, we will have Owen." Talia ignored the snickers and the nudges and sat back down. Her fingertips curled around the hem of her shirt. Her visage remained motionless, but her ears were pleasantly warm. Owen initiated conversation regarding his father's plumbing enterprise. However, Talia failed to comprehend any of it. She was aware that none of them believed her. Not even the instructor. The task was not the only thing that seemed impossible to them. The individual who claimed it was a girl with deep brown complexion, tight braids that were secured with a soft pink scrunchie and a hand-me-down backpack that had a broken zipper. Her footwear was not entirely new. She lacked a commanding presence and did not employ sophisticated language. Therefore, to them, the phrase NASA sounded like a form of deception, a form of fantasy. During Owen's presentation, a piece of paper was handed to her at desk. A boy named Theo approached her and inquired, "Did she clean the bathrooms there?" Talia did not respond. She did not weep either, not at that time. However, when the bell sounded and everyone hurried to retrieve their backpacks, she remained seated, her gaze fixed on the classroom door. She expressed her desire for her mother to have a different occupation for the first time. Something that is simpler to articulate. An object that was not subjected to a sideways gaze. However, she continued to maintain her conviction that it was significant. A statement that her mother once made to her was, "Some truths are too profound for small minds. You simply allow them to make up." Despite the tightness in her stomach, Talia emerged from that classroom with a smile on her face. She did not feel ashamed of herself. She was mortified for them. However, she was unaware that the lesson had not yet concluded for her classmates or Miss Lawson. The Jefferson home was situated on the outskirts of a tranquil road in Mobile, Alabama. Clean, but not ostentatious. The residence was characterized by delicate yellow paint and green shutters. The porch light was perpetually illuminated prior to sunset, and the screen door creaked slightly upon entry. Talia proceeded through that door at a slower pace than she typically did. She removed her trainers, discarded her knapsack at the base of the stairs, and proceeded directly to the kitchen. Her mother had arrived home early, as indicated by the aroma of garlic and onions. Dr. Renee Jefferson was stirring a substance in a large red pot while standing at the range. She did not immediately turn around. She stated, "You are tardy." Not in a severe manner, rather, it is simply noted. Talia sat down in a chair that she had retrieved. She murmured, "I had to remain behind to clean the desks." Renee swiveled, observed her daughter's expression, and promptly lowered the flame. "Please engage in conversation with me." Talia did not speak for a single second. She was fidgeting with the sleeves of her windbreaker while her hands were in her lap. Her expression suggested that she was eager to express herself, but she was uncertain about how to begin. They laughed, she ultimately stated. Renee was not required to inquire about the identity of the individual. She retrieved the chair that was situated across from her daughter and seated down. Absence of dramatics. Absence of panic or gulp. Why? I informed them that you are employed by NASA. Renee gave a slight inclination. And they did not believe you? No, not at all. A child suggested that you may have cleaned the bathrooms. Renee exhaled quietly, not quite an exhalation, but rather a moment of contemplation. And what was your response? I did not. Miss Lawson quickly moved on, as if she was unwilling to confront the matter. Renee's eyebrows twitched slightly as she read that section, however, she maintained her composure. Are you of the opinion that you have made any errors in your speech? Talia abruptly glanced upward. No. Therefore, refrain from assuming that their ignorance is your own. However, they chuckled. And that is their responsibility, not yours. For a brief period, they maintained silence. The space was filled with the bubbling from the kettle. Outside, a dog issued 2 barks before ceasing. You know, Renee said, rising to stir the food once more, when I first expressed my desire to work in aerospace, my high school guidance counselor advised me to be more realistic. He suggested that I consider a career in secretarial work. Talia's eyes were open as she gazed upward. That occurred in 1998. I refrained from engaging in a conversation with her, rather, I discontinued my attendance at her office. Was there any discomfort? Renee again confronted her daughter after turning off the stove. Yes. However, it also ignited a flame within me. I was not enraged at her, rather, I was resolute in my resolve to not allow her to dictate my identity. Talia beamed, albeit in a subtle manner. She appreciated her mother's ability to communicate in a straightforward manner, without resorting to dramatics. Her composure was a source of fortitude. Renee casually remarked, you know, I could attend your class. Is it correct that this Friday is Parent Day? Talia blanks. Would you be inclined to do that? I am entitled to the day off, and it could be enjoyable. However, what would you choose to wear? Renee smiled. I was considering the possibility of wearing my NASA badge and the black blazer you despise. Talia's irises were illuminated. That is acceptable. Go ahead and execute that. Consequently, they both burst into genuine, belly-aching hilarity. The kitchen's atmosphere was more buoyant. Renee placed both dishes of stew on the table. She shared anecdotes with Talia regarding her initial job interview and the incident in which she inadvertently spilt coffee on a flight simulator keyboard over the course of their meal. Talia was amused by the narratives. She no longer experienced feelings of inadequacy. She perceived herself as fortunate. Remember, Renee reminded them as they concluded, you are not required to provide proof to anyone. However, if the occasion arises for you to do so, please be assured that I am by your side. Talia's cheekbones were swollen with food, and she nodded slowly. And your badge? Renee's lips curled upward. That, as well. However, she was not attending solely to underscore her point. She arrived with the intention of relocating the room. Talia was unaware of the situation at the time. Talia was not prepared for the rapid arrival of Friday. Whispers continued to circulate throughout the classroom for the duration of the week, resembling grit in the sunlight. A few children attempted to apologize in an awkward manner. One offered her a crumpled fruit snack, while another murmured, I was merely joking. However, the majority of them conducted themselves as though nothing had transpired. Talia was perfectly content with that. She had not forgotten. The classroom was abuzz with excitement as the morning bell tolled. Miss Lawson had reorganized the workstations into a horseshoe shape, which provided ample space for parents to present. She was dressed in a purple blouse and had arranged a tray of sugar cookies, which were evidently purchased from a grocery store. This was an ineffective attempt to create a festive atmosphere at the event. Talia was seated in the center, with her backpack carefully tucked beneath her chair. She was experiencing anxiety. However, not in a frightened manner. There was a sense of anxiety that was akin to waiting. She did not inform anyone that her mother was expected to arrive. The initial parents arrived at approximately 9:15 a.m., consisting of a man in a mechanic's uniform, a woman in scrubs, and a few mothers carrying Starbucks cups and tote bags. They beamed and waved excessively. The presentation commenced. Clapping and light mirth were heard. A narrative was recounted by a father regarding the repair of an exploding wash basin. Another mother discussed the possibility of instructing yoga to infants. Talia continued to glance at the door. Subsequently, it opened as Miss Lawson was introducing the subsequent speaker. The room was entered by Dr. Renee Jefferson. She donned the black blazer that Talia detested, It was pristine and tailored. Her identification insignia was suspended from a Navy lanyard that bore the words NASA Johnson Space Center. Black trousers. There is no jewelry, with the exception of a silver watch. Her demeanor was composed. Not arrogant. Not very flamboyant. Presently, in an instant, the chamber was devoid of sound. The air itself appeared to be at rest. Miss Lawson's response was a stuttered, and this is. Talia rose from her seat. This is my mother, Dr. Renee Jefferson. The teacher's lips parted, and she then forced a smile. She blinked. Okay. We are pleased to have you here. Would you be willing to share information about your work? Renee extended a courteous bow. Certainly. Good morning. I am an aerospace systems engineer at NASA, where I am responsible for the planning of missions, the integration of flight systems, and the development of operational strategies for our lunar and Mars programs. Numerous individuals directed their gaze towards Talia. A small number of individuals maintained an open mouth. One child murmured, "Whoa." Not hurrying, Renee continued. The rhythm of her voice was distinct, smooth, and grounded. The majority of my responsibilities involve the development of systems that facilitate the safe passage of astronauts through space. Our investigation encompasses a wide range of topics, including the manner in which they breathe and the manner in which data is transmitted back to Earth. Then, she paused, allowing the situation to calm. She added, scanning the room, I did not come here to impress you. I arrived here because my daughter informed you of my activities, and some of you were skeptical. Silence. Talia's heartbeat was audible in her hearing. She refrained from blinking. Renee approached the whiteboard and touched a printed diagram. She had brought a genuine schematic from a previous assignment. You are not required to comprehend all of this, however. Take a moment before you laugh the next time someone tells you something that seems too grand to be true. Because brilliance does not always manifest in the manner you anticipate. She turned her attention to her daughter. And when an individual speaks the truth with pride, do not diminish it, allow it to remain. Miss Lawson cleared her voice. Dr. Jefferson, I am grateful for your assistance. Your explanation was extremely informative. Renee beamed and proceeded to cross the room to sit beside Talia, who was endeavoring to suppress a grin. The room continued to move at a leisurely pace following that. The subsequent parent experienced difficulty during their presentation regarding the operation of a car dealership. There was no laughter. No one murmured. Additionally, Talia? It was the first time she had ever sat up so tall. She refrained from seeking approbation from others. She did not require it. Her truth was audible to all at that precise moment. However, the majority of them were unaware that the woman they had just encountered had not always been given the attention she deserved. This was just one of the thousands of moments that she encountered on her journey to NASA. Before she was Dr. Renee Jefferson, she was Renee Lewis, a lanky teenager with spectacles that were too large for her face and notebooks filled with diagrams that no one else in her neighborhood bothered to look at. She was raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in a home with a front veranda that was sagging and a mother who worked 2 jobs to ensure that the lights were on. She recognized at an early age that she preferred machines over cosmetics. Renee constructed miniature contraptions from obsolete cassette players and broken fans while her peers engaged in jump rope. Her uncle once described her as peculiar. She heard something distinct. She perceived it as a compliment. She acquired a book on space shuttles from the public library at the age of 13 and read it in its entirety in a single evening. She was self-educating herself in rudimentary programming by the age of 14. She did not discuss it extensively in school. She had rapidly acquired the knowledge that expressing her desire to work at NASA would result in either ridicule or disregard. Her educators did not exert any pressure on her. Renee's intelligence was not the reason she maintained perfect grades in all subjects, but rather that they had already determined her future. "You are exceedingly organized," stated one counselor. "You would be an excellent receptionist." Her math teacher raised his eyebrows when she mentioned applying to a summer program for young engineers at Georgia Tech. "That is quite competitive. Are you certain you want to squander the application fee?" Nevertheless, she submitted an application. Additionally, she gained entry. Everything was altered during that summer. For the first time, she was in the company of children who shared her perspective on life. Notebooks that are brimming with inquiries. Inquisitiveness without apology. She returned home with a folder containing blueprints and a sense of direction. However, college was yet another challenging ascent. She was one of only 3 black women in the complete engineering department at Auburn University. In group assignments, she was consistently requested to take notes rather than solve equations. Even after 3 semesters, her name was mispronounced by her professors. She refrained from lodging any grievances. She continued to appear. Renee tutored high school students on weekends and worked evenings at a diner near campus. There were moments when she contemplated abandoning the task, not because she was incapable of completing it, but because it was a draining endeavor to demonstrate her identity. Once in the spring, she overheard two of her classmates discussing behind her back after she successfully completed a thermodynamics midterm. One individual stated, "She must have received assistance. It is possible that she copied from someone else," the other individual suggested. She refrained from confronting them. Not a single tear was shed by her. Upon returning home, she promptly commenced the preparation for her finals by opening her textbook. With the conclusion of the semester, she achieved the highest ranking in her department. They observed it, despite the fact that no one could articulate it verbally. Following her matriculation, she spent time as an intern at Lockheed Martin. The subsequent step was to submit an application to NASA, which she perceived as a blind shot. However, her curriculum vitae was self-sufficient. In March, she received the call while seated at a laundromat, where she had a basket of damp towels and a single functioning dryer. Her mother wept on the phone for an entire 5 minutes. Subsequently, the actual labor commenced. The meetings, the designs, the late evenings, the brief gazes that occur in conference rooms. The instances in which she was required to reiterate her words 3 times in order to be heard. Nevertheless, she maintained her insistence on speaking out. She recalled a younger version of herself who only required one individual to believe it was possible every time she sat at a console or sketched a new idea. And now, when she entered her daughter's 5th grade classroom with that insignia dangling from her neck, she was not merely representing herself. She was assuming the role of every female who had ever been instructed, "People like you do not do that." However, the purpose of this was no longer to establish any facts. It was about instilling a new quality in her daughter that was irrevocable. On the Monday following, there was a noticeable difference. Not in the manner of pyrotechnics. Small changes, the kind that are only apparent when one is paying close attention. Talia was not anticipating a spectacle when she entered the classroom. Additionally, she was unsuccessful in obtaining one. However, the atmosphere was considerably more tranquil. When she spoke, her eyes did not roll. Theo refrained from whispering. In reality, he refrained from making eye contact at all. Kennedy and Samir approached her near the jungle gym during playtime. They stood in a state of awkwardness, transferring their weight from one foot to the other. Kennedy, chewing her lower lip, stated, "My mother stated that your mother's speech was truly remarkable. She sounded extremely intelligent." "She is," Talia responded without hesitation. Samira nodded. "I researched NASA information after school. It's quite fascinating." That was the extent of their communication. However, they did not immediately depart. They remained. For the first time in the year, the 3 of them sat on the bench and engaged in conversation about a topic other than slime videos or snack transactions. Miss Lawson approached Talia later that day as the class prepared for dismissal. She began, her voice lower than usual, "I wanted to say something. About 1 week ago." Talia glanced upward, her eyes wide with alertness. Miss Lawson continued, "I should have approached that situation differently. I should have inquired more and not acted so hastily. I apologize." Talia was uncertain about what to say. She was not accustomed to adults apologizing in that manner. She slowly nodded once. It sufficed for the time being. However, not all individuals experienced a change of spirit. There were still children who murmured, but they were more cautious about it. Several individuals gazed at her as if they were anticipating her error in order to re-establish equilibrium within their own minds. Dean was one of the boys who would murmur, "NASA kid," under his breath whenever she passed, as if he were attempting to undermine the progress she had made. Talia maintained her composure. She did not contract. She continued to perform her duties. She is now asking more inquiries in class. Even when she was uncertain of her position, she raised her hand. Because it no longer frightened her, not in the same way as it used to, even if she made a mistake. She overheard a classmate remark, "She believes she is superior to us," one afternoon during group work. Talia responded with a composed expression, "I am certain that I am meant to be here." Following that, there was no further disagreement. Renee also observed the change at her residence. Talia conversed more during dinner, disclosing minor details about her day without prompting. She resumed her artistic endeavors, this time focusing on diagrams rather than caricatures. Similar to her mother's pencil-drawn star maps, helmets, and missiles. Renee discovered a post-it note that had been affixed to the refrigerator one evening. It was as follows, "I will also be employed there. Love, Talia." For 3 days, she refrained from relocating it. However, this was not solely about confidence. Talia had undergone a profound transformation. It was no longer a matter of proving anyone incorrect. It was a matter of standing in her own truth. I was aware of the truth, regardless of whether anyone chuckled in gym class. Talia composed the following response when the instructor requested that they formulate an objective that was not associated with sports, engineer space missions, just like my mother. No one chuckled when the teacher read it aloud. They merely observed. However, at home, an additional sensation was brewing, a tranquil moment between mother and daughter that would serve as a foundation for all that they had endured. The house was once again filled with the aroma of Renee's renowned lemon chicken, as it had been a full week since Parent Day. It was Friday night. Talia was sketching a novel design at the kitchen table, which involved a rotating satellite that utilized solar panels resembling flower petals. She did not speak, but she occasionally paused to erase or stare at the angle she was drawing. From the wash basin, Renee observed as a dish was slowly dried. The manner in which her daughter concentrated, with her tongue gently pressed against her upper lip, reminded her of herself at 12, as she was perpetually constructing something within her mind. Renee inquired tenderly, "Do you wish to take a break?" Talia's eyes turned upward. "Almost finished." Renee smiled and leaned against the counter. "You have been engaged in that task for 2 hours. I am aware, I simply desire uniform appearance." She completed the final line and then orientated the paper towards her mother. Renee approached and conducted a more thorough examination. "Explain it to me." She imitated the shape with her hands. "Well, it's a satellite. However, instead of keeping all the panels flat, they open up like this. Consequently, it is capable of accumulating a greater amount of energy when it rotates, contingent upon the sun's angle." Impressed, Renee acknowledged. "That is a clever concept. From where did you acquire that idea?" "I am uncertain. I was contemplating sunflowers earlier, and the way they move during the day just occurred to me." Renee sat beside her and gingerly placed the paper on the table. "Do you know what I find most appealing about that concept?" she inquired. "What?" "You were not attempting to impress anyone, rather, you were merely attempting to resolve a matter." Talia once more gazed downward at the drawing. "Yes, I suppose I was." They remained seated in silence for a minute, a silence that required no remediation. Talia then spoke once more, but this time with a more gentle tone. "Do you believe that they truly believed me after you departed?" Renee placed her hand on the table. "Some have done so, others have not. This is not always within your power. Consequently, what should I do? You persist in your commitment to the truth, even when it appears that no one is listening. That is the challenging aspect, not just once, but repeatedly." Talia entertained that notion. "In the same way that you did?" Renee smiled gently. "As I continue to do. Had it always been this challenging for you?" Renee's gaze was contemplative as she reclined in the chair. "Occasionally, it was more challenging. However, I ceased to anticipate that it would become effortless." Talia regarded her mother as a person, rather than merely as a parent. A person who had fought through barriers she had never even seen. A person who possessed a quiet authority that did not require a multitude to acknowledge it. "I used to wish you had a regular job," she stated. As if it were effortless to articulate, Renee chuckled. "I am aware, I could observe it in your expression when individuals inquired. Nevertheless, I now find it to be quite impressive. I mean, it's truly impressive." Renee delicately tucked one of her daughter's braids behind her ear as she reached out. "I am proud of you, you know," she stated. "Not as a result of your remarks in class, but rather because you expressed them." Talia experienced a sudden sensation of warmth in her bosom, which was not merely pride, but also relief. She was unaware of the weight until it began to dissipate. She acknowledged, "I was under the impression that you would not be present on that particular day." Renee raised her eyebrow. "The question is, why not? I suspected that you might conclude that it was not worth the effort." Renee's voice was firm and unwavering as she leaned in closer, following a brief pause. "Anything that challenges your self-perception is always worth attending." There was no need for them to elaborate further. Talia stood, proceeded to the refrigerator, and affixed her drawing to the magnet that was located adjacent to the grocery list. Renee observed her with a heart that was both filled and silent. Not all lessons were met with acclaim. Some of them remained in their designated locations, visible only to those who had earned them. However, there was one final thing to say, not for Talia, but for all others who were still in the process of acquiring an understanding of what brilliance entails. Miss Lawson performed an unexpected action during the morning announcements the following week. She read aloud to the class a student submission from the Career Dreams bulletin board. This one is from Talia Jefferson, she stated. She wrote, "I aspire to construct machines that can travel to locations that have never been visited by humans, as someone must devise a method to transport us there. I am confident that I am capable of doing so." This time, there was no mirth, rather, there was a sense of tranquility. A few students turned to gaze at her, not with disbelief, but with a sense of respect. Talia remained composed and concentrated as she sat at her workstation, meticulously sketching small gears in the margins of her notebook. She was not required to raise her head. She did not require the room to express her joy. That was not the primary objective. Applause was never the subject of this narrative. It was about the truth. The concept of being certain of something in the face of skepticism from others. About the definition of speaking boldly, not to be overly boisterous, but to be forthright. The individuals in that classroom had observed an unexpected event. Yes, she was a woman with credentials, however, she was also a woman who fully understood her identity. Who did not wait for permission to be granted. And a daughter who observed her enter a room where belief had already departed, and who continued to imbue it with power. Talia was no longer required to persuade anyone. She was not anticipating the class's acceptance of her claims. She had already departed, she was now concentrating on what she perceived as feasible. This is the reason why narratives such as